bacteria on the wall, you're doing enormous damage. You know, you're killing the possibility of therapy when people are really sick.
So,
real talk.
Can you talk a little bit about your background? How did you get into recording music? What were you doing before?
I was designing fighter airplanes.
That's what we want to know about.
Yes. Which fighter airplanes did you design?
Well, I was one of 3 guys that got the F-16 started. 2 brilliant fighter pilots that I worked with, John Boyd and Everett Riccioni. And at roughly the same time, I was asked by a faction in the Air Force to help them design a close support airplane that some people in the Air Force, a small minority, wanted to build. And that evolved into the A-10. So I basically headed up the technical side of the Air Force's design concept team for the A-10.
Otherwise known as?
The Warthog. The Warthog. In lots of ways, I'm prouder of that than the F-16. I mean, the F-16s are very glamorous and, you know, fast and super maneuverable and does whifferdills. The A-10 is kind of slower and certainly ugly, which is why it's called the Warthog. But it was much harder to accomplish, and it was something that we did over the dead body of the Air Force. They really didn't want it because it was a mission they didn't want to do. It was for supporting the Army, for supporting, you know, Army soldiers in the field directly, and that's something the Air Force never wanted to do. They wanted to fight their own war, go bomb the pee out of the enemy's hinterlands on their own, under the control of their own general, not under the control of Army generals.
It wasn't in the teamwork at that time, huh?
There still isn't. There probably never will be. But so the A-10 was a much more difficult thing to accomplish.
And the A-10 was key in winning the first Gulf War, right?
Absolutely. It was the only airplane that was worth having there. You could have sent all the other airplanes home and the results would have been exactly the same. You know.
What do you think of the current war?
The Air Force doesn't like to hear that, but needless to say.
What do you think of the current war in Iraq?
A disgrace. Something that every American ought to be ashamed of. You know, I mean, not that it's our fault, it's the fault of our government, but what our government has done there simply on behalf of, you know, of major money interests, nothing else, has nothing to do with democracy, freedom, or anything else. It's a really sad, sad disgrace.
This is also what this film is about too, is showing the world that there's people in America. Not everybody here is, you know, Bush, you know what I mean? It's like you got, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If everybody was, maybe I'd try to find another country.
So what happened? How did you go from designing fighter jets to recording music?
Well, I'd already been recording music as an amateur. I've been doing that for quite a few years, kind of teaching myself to record in these funky neighborhood bars where they played, you know, jazz, local jazz artists would come in. I had a lot of friends in the jazz community here. And so I used to go and they'd let me come in with my little battery tape recorder, cassette recorder. And I got more and more interested. And got ambitious to make it sound better. And, you know, started improving the equipment, fiddling with it a little. And pretty soon musicians were asking me to come around and, you know, come to their gigs and document their jam sessions and whatnot. And
with
one
like
of
camera or with just recording?
just with my tape recorder, right? They wanted recordings of the music. And one of my best friends on that scene was a great, great singer, then not so well known, named Shirley Horn. And she was kind of like a drinking buddy of mine, and of course I admired her music. She was a brilliant pianist and fabulous singer. And so I would go anywhere to record anything she wanted recorded. And in one of those conjunctions of things that I used to think were accidents, I had an old piano, a 1911 Steinway, that an old girlfriend of mine had left me. She'd gone off to Ireland and left me this piano. And it was unplayable because the pin block was loose. It wouldn't stay in tune for an afternoon. So it was just sitting around the house and kind of moldering. And I started to feel guilty about it because it was a Steinway, a wonderful 1911 Steinway, just you couldn't play it. But about the same time, I was looking for some people to rebuild the piano and found a young pair of partners who had just started a small firm to rebuild pianos, and they impressed me that they were really committed to this, so I let them rebuild the piano. They did a brilliant job. When the piano came back, it was like one of those 1 in 1,000 Steinways that sings, right? You couldn't know that in advance because you couldn't play it. And so I was very excited. I called up Shirley and asked her to come out and, have a listen and play. And she fell in love with the piano. So I told her she could use it to rehearse on any time. So she used to come play all night, play till dawn. And of course, it was an enormous privilege to hear her do it. And so one night, a few months after I got the piano back, she's rehearsing, playing the piano. It's like 3 in the morning, and I'm sitting on a stool in the studio listening to her. It wasn't a studio then, it was a living room. And she looks up, and she says, "P, baby." She says, "I want to do my next album on this piano, and I want you to be my engineer." So that was my first gig. Fabulous out, yeah. That's.
And now, how many CDs do you have out with Maple Shade?
Now about 105.
And what's the website that people can go and order your CDs from?
www.mapleshaderecords.com. Not mapleshade.com, mapleshaderecords.com.
Get it right.